All right, so we're going to welcome in a very special guest right now. It's Mitch Milani, host of The Bottom Line View on YouTube. And as always, we're going to debrief what happened yesterday, championship Sunday. It's championship Monday. We're going to go through everything that happened yesterday and give a little bit of a preview for what's to come in a couple of weeks. And that is the Super Bowl in New Orleans. Mitch, thanks so much again for taking the time to be with me today.
Of course. Another crazy conference championship Sunday. Looking forward to Super Bowl 59.
Yeah, and it was capped off with what else is new? Bills and Chiefs having
Yeah.
another historic all-time battle. And frankly, that's what everyone's talking about today. Obviously, we're going to get to that. I do want to start off with the first game, the NFC Championship game, more so on the Commanders side, because I do want to touch on the Eagles, but I want to do that as part of the Super Bowl preview. Um, there's no doubt Jayden Daniels was absolutely magical, not just in the postseason this year for the Commanders, but all throughout the regular season. A rookie season for the ages. For the Washington Commanders, who over exceeded expectations drastically in Dan Quinn's first year as head coach, what do they need to do to build around Jayden Daniels to put themselves back in a position similar to where they were this year, and not only be back in the same position, but make sure that they're a better team heading into next year?
Well, I think first things first, and you might not like this answer, but they got to keep their offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. That's first things first there. So that definitely helps because I think the marriage between Jayden's skill set and what Cliff was doing with him was the biggest part of their success this season. You know, the quick game in the passing game, the screens, the yards after catch element, the occasional deep ball, the run quarterback element. The skill of the team felt underwhelming in terms of the overall player personnel. So they could use some improvement, but I do think the O-line overall was solid. They could maybe get a little bit better there. I do think they could use another game-breaking, game-changing weapon, and that might be the biggest thing they could do. Terry McLaurin had an unbelievable season, and some other players down the stretch like Old Man Zach Ertz, De'Ami Brown, Zacchaeus, these guys all stepped up, but I definitely feel like whether it's a running back or a receiver, I feel like they could use just a dynamic, game-changing, game-shifting weapon. And then defensively, they definitely need to establish what Dan Quinn wants to be moving forward and who can help him. And it does feel like cornerback will be one of those areas to address. I do think that the linebackers are a little bit older. We'll see what happens with Bobby Wagner, but edge rusher, getting a game-changing edge rusher, like every team's looking for that sort of stuff. But this was a Commanders team that, like you said, kind of a miracle team. They did have a lot of fortunate victories, but they were very, very good in close games. So it'll be interesting to see in year two, because we saw with the Texans, right? Like they got back to the same place, but they felt like they were a worse team, or Stroud felt worse. Daniels had an even better season, historically speaking. We'll see if that can carry over, but I felt like a lot more of their wins were down to the wire, Hail Marys, crazy comebacks. So it will be interesting in a tough division if they can carry that into 2025.
Right, and from Dan Quinn's perspective, I mean, we saw him with the Atlanta Falcons get so close to a Super
Mm-hmm.
Bowl title in 2016, almost beating your New England Patriots. Obviously, we all know what happened with the 28-3, but after that, it was 3-4 seasons of just mediocrity, and they weren't able to get anywhere close to that point. Um, if you're Dan Quinn, how do you going forward make sure that this wasn't kind of the peak? How do you take what was what this Commanders team did on the field this year and build off of that going forward?
Well, I think something happened there in Atlanta after 2016. And like I mentioned, Cliff Kingsbury is staying for now. Kyle Shanahan left after that season. So I think in Atlanta, they weren't able to ever address the offensive coordinator position in nearly the same capacity once Kyle Shanahan left, because you're losing one of the best coaches in the league. So I think it comes down to the culture. I think has been established, and I think it's strong. I think you need to continue to do what you did last offseason. You'll bring in players that you think can fit your system. But I think what he did more than anything was bring in leaders, bring in culture builders, bring in smart players, bring in players that are going to want to win. And I think that definitely helped them establish what they want to be. But I think just continuing to tweak, continuing to evolve, especially offensively with Jayden, don't stay stale, right? Try to continue to push the envelope. And ultimately, sometimes it comes down to injuries and luck and things like that. But I think as long as you put yourself in the position of the playoffs, you're going to have a chance, because right now there might not be a quarterback in the NFC that you would rather have moving forward.
Chatting with Mitch Milani. You can follow him on Twitter at Mitch Milani and go subscribe to his YouTube channel at TheBottomLineView. I want to shift now to the AFC game, and that's really what everyone's talking about, and everyone's Monday morning quarterbacking this morning. You know, heartbreaking for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills yet again. That's now 4 consecutive devastating playoff losses to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I mean, these are all down to the wire, nail biter games that the Bills just fall short. You know, why does this keep happening? Because everyone's speculating online. There's so many, people are pointing blame at the refs. People are pointing blame at Sean McDermott. People are pointing fingers at Joe Brady. I want to hear your perspective. Why is it that year in, year out, the Buffalo Bills keep falling just short of the Kansas City Chiefs?
Well, I do think that 1 4th down call was really bad. I do think that should have been a first down. I'm not going to say that's the reason they lost, because there was a number of short yardage plays in which I felt like, okay, we try this quarterback sneak tush push a couple times and it's not really working. It's not really going our way. Maybe we need to find something else in our bag. Is it a QB power? Are we going to go in empty and run Josh that way? Maybe we just run James Cook, who's running for 6.5 yards per carry and only got 13 carries in the game, which is a little odd. But I do feel like this game, it's again, same reason, coaching. The coaching mismatch is outrageous in these games. I think that's the difference every single time. Andy Reid has been coaching circles around Sean McDermott's defense. The best defensive coach in this game every year is not the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, which is kind of crazy, right? The 2 best coaches in the game every year are on Kansas City's side. And Spagnuolo, I think, showed you in that moment at the end of the game, 4th and 5. I don't care who you have at quarterback. Josh Allen makes a great throw against pressure. There's 2 defenders running at him free on a blitz, and he throws the ball off his back foot, and Dalton Kincaid drops it. Now, I do think there's kind of 2 areas to this. So first is coaching, where Reid just continues to just decimate McDermott's defense. Like, no answers. Now, Christian Benford got hurt. That definitely hurt them because Elam is just not it. And maybe part of that is the depth in the secondary needs to be addressed. Taylor Rapp was out. The safety position has been bad for the Bills all season. Some of it is personnel. Some of it is also the fact that the Bills defensively never seemingly have a player that can make plays like Chris Jones can or like Trent McDuffie. They don't have like a superstar defender. They have good players. Ed Oliver played a good game. But I think that it's a combination of both, right? It really hasn't come down to quarterbacks. You look at the stats, you watch the games. I mean, it hasn't really come down to the quarterbacks. I thought the Bills offensively, they ran the ball well. Maybe they didn't run it early enough. That could be addressed. I thought Joe Brady wasn't his best game plan, but honestly, like, they were in position at the end there to win. 2 points could have been better. The 2-point conversions, the 2-point attempts could have been better on his part. There are small things that he could have done better. But I think ultimately it comes down to Sean McDermott's inability to go head-to-head with Andy Reid and coming up small in these moments. And I think that ultimately you probably can't make this move this offseason because there's not enough candidates to really fulfill the job, in my opinion. But I do feel like Sean McDermott, it just might be time. Like, he's been given so many opportunities at this point that you just need to make a change, I think, just for the sake of this rivalry alone. Like, there's really no reason you shouldn't make a move here. And yeah, that's really it. I think the Bills have been so close. They could have won that game. They very well could have won that game very easily.
Oh, and I think you can say that frankly about any of the last four. I mean, pick your poison. Any of the last four meetings between these two teams in the postseason, the Bills were right there. Look, I was saying that after the Ravens game. Yes, they win and they won that game, but Sean McDermott is just way too conservative. And I go back to that decision at the end of the Ravens game, fourth down and goal from the 2 yard line, up by 5 points, and you have Josh Allen, the MVP of the league, with your season on the line, and you opt to take the 3 points rather than go for it 2 yards to move on to the next round, and you opt to take three points and give the ball back to Lamar Jackson. I think Sean McDermott, year in year out, is just too conservative as a coach, and that's what has kept costing the Buffalo Bills. Now, you mentioned that there's nobody really out there at this point to replace him. I do think that Sean McDermott is definitely a big part of the problem right now for the Bills. Um, and I just wanted to ask you, you hinted at it a little bit, but is it just not possible? Is it just not going to happen that Sean McDermott is going to be able to lead this Buffalo Bills team to postseason glory? What do you think this Bills team needs? What kind of coach do you think they need to be able to really push them over the edge?
That's a good question because I felt like their offensive coordinator position was definitely much better this year. But then the question always is, can that offensive coordinator stick around with the team? And will he continue to evolve with the team and the quarterback? And that's always something that's not sticky. As we've seen, many offensive coordinators get hired as head coaches. So it destroys that entirely, right? I I think McDermott is a good coach. I just think that at a certain point, I believe there's a history of like coach and quarterback relationships once they get to a certain point. And I think this is also the case with John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. Once they get to a certain point, they just are not able to capture the Super Bowl. Like, so you might just have to make a change. Historically speaking, it just doesn't work out after a certain amount of time, 6 seasons, 7 seasons or whatever, of not being able to win a Super Bowl. I think the type of coach you have to target is someone that's already established, because I don't think you can really bring in anybody that is like just fresh and new and different, because I think you need somebody that's going to command the culture in an equal way. And I think McDermott does a great job of that. I don't even think it has to be an offensive coach. I think it could be just a guy that is rather brilliant on defense or just brilliant on offense, whatever it may be. Maybe it's even a trade for a coach or something. If somebody like Mike Tomlin, somebody like that comes to the forefront, where that team is looking to move on from that coach, and maybe just a different sense of something a little bit different for both teams could work out. But I was also thinking about the guys available now. I mean, like Mike McCarthy would be somebody that's had success. Like, he's an offensive guy. He's a Super Bowl champ. He had multiple winning seasons with the Cowboys. I'm not sure if that exactly would be the guy that you would go after, but that's kind of like the archetype of what I'm talking about. I don't necessarily think he's the guy. And then another interesting one would be like, do you just steal Steve Spagnuolo from the Chiefs and like just completely wreck half their team and then try to go from there? And hopefully, Steve Spagnuolo can upgrade your defense a little bit and Joe Brady can stick around and run your offense. And you've kind of got like a head coach on both sides of the football. There's many ways you can go about this.
Chatting with Mitch Milani right here on the swing. Let's talk quickly about the Kansas City Chiefs and give a little bit of a preview to the Super Bowl ahead. 17 straight one-score games now for the Chiefs that they have won. Pretty incredible, and I want to give you my theory on this because there's people everywhere. I mean, I'm watching the game with a group of buddies and everyone's saying, oh, the Chiefs are so lucky. They're so lucky. How do they keep getting away with this? And my theory on it is the Chiefs are the one team, I think, in the NFL that when you're going up against them, you have to play mistake-free football. And we see that every single week. If you don't make every single play, I mean, the margin yesterday in last night's game was Dalton Kincaid not making that catch. That's the margin of error. And when you're not making, if you make a mistake here or a mistake there, the Chiefs will barely do what they need to do to squeak by. Is there added pressure onto teams going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, knowing that you cannot make a mistake against this team?
Yeah, I think there's a level of mystique as there was with the Patriots, where it's like you can't play any less than 100%. You're probably going to have to play better than you've ever played. Like, you're probably going to have to make more third down conversions. You're probably going to have to go for it on fourth down. You're probably going to have to hit that 2-point conversion. You can't miss an extra point. You can't get a punt blocked. You can't get your field goal blocked, right? Denver Broncos, like small things in the game where it's going to come down to one play at the end. And it's funny because I feel like all these Bills games, no matter how they play out within the first 3.5 quarters, that it's ultimately going to come down to last possession. And if you would have told a Bills fan, we're going to give you the ball down a field goal with 3 minutes left, 3 timeouts, the 2-minute warning, Josh Allen's going to have it and a chance to win with a touchdown, I think they would have taken that, right? But ultimately, the mistakes that they made throughout the game, whether it be, the 2-point attempts that they didn't get, the poor defense, a lot of different things, the 4th down and 1 that they weren't able to get, or maybe were, but they didn't say they got it. That all came into effect where at the end, it came down to that last possession, and Spagnuolo, the better coach, came through with a great play call on 4th and 5 where it disrupted your playmaker and you weren't able to make the catch. Ultimately, it was just a drop. So, and it honestly, like Kincaid, that's a hard catch. Like it looked like a pretty tough catch to me. I'm not going to totally blame him, but yeah, I think you're right. It's just like you've got to have great game plans too. Like, I think what people are missing about the Chiefs is the teams that lose to them more often than not, they get out coached. It's not necessarily that they get outplayed. Like, it's a lot about Andy Reid. I mean, at this point, he has to be considered arguably the greatest coach. Like, it's him or Belichick at this point, right?
Oh, I'm with you. I mean, 4 Super Bowls, possibly 4 Super Bowls in 6 seasons, and 5 appearances in 6 seasons is otherworldly. I mean, we've just never seen this. And it's Andy Reid, it's Spags, it's Patrick Mahomes, and that's why it was never a doubt to me that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to get to this point. They were going to run through the AFC because Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league and Andy Reid is the best head coach in the league. Now, for this Philadelphia Eagles team, it's, Sirianni, good coach, Jalen Hurts, good quarterback. But the rest of the roster, there's no doubt that it's the most complete roster in the NFL, and overall, top to bottom, it's a better roster than what the Kansas City Chiefs have. Is this gap in talent from top to bottom enough for them to get past Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid?
This is interesting because it's the exact same matchup we got 2 years ago, in my opinion, where the Eagles were the best roster, the best team in the NFL, and they lost the game at the end. The Chiefs won it in a 1-score game. And that was kind of a weird game too, because if you look back at that game, there were like punt returns, fumble returns. Like, the Chiefs really didn't outplay the Eagles on offense and defense. It actually came down to special teams, believe it or not, in that game, in my opinion. So this game, I think what could be the X factor for the Eagles, there's 2 different individuals, but I think the one that you're not thinking about, because Saquon is obvious. They didn't have that guy. Arguably, I mean, if there is a better player in the NFL than Patrick Mahomes, it might be that guy. I mean, he is insane. But they have a defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio. And I felt like the big mismatch in that game, was the Eagles. They didn't have any answers. Jonathan Gannon, your Cardinals coach, he didn't have any answers against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and even the run game. I remember them being able to run the ball, really well. I don't think Mahomes even had 200 yards. But every single time, they would have these motions where they're wide open on the goal line, or every big play, seemingly the Chiefs were able to convert. And the Eagles, once again, they have arguably the best defense in the league. They have arguably the best secondary in the league. They have a good pass rush. And it could come down to the difference between Fangio knows the Chiefs pretty well because he was a head coach with the Denver Broncos. So he should actually be fairly familiar with that offense, with that scheme, with Patrick Mahomes, what he does well, what he doesn't do well, or what some of the things he can expose, right? So that could be a huge thing in this matchup if the Eagles win the game. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is going to have to play well. That has to continue after last week. That is the big wild card, so to speak. But I think the Fangio matchup is really intriguing. And then obviously Saquon Barkley. Can Spags find a way to slow him down? Because I don't know if anyone has all year.
So, Mitch, we are 2 weeks away from the big game. As you said, another rematch, Chiefs Eagles. Should be a great game. The last one was certainly one for the ages. Obviously, plenty of time to think about who's going to win and what's going to happen. But your initial read, your 2 weeks from now, who do you think is going to be hoisting the Lombardi Trophy?
I kind of felt like before the playoffs that the AFC would win the Super Bowl. And I predicted Bills Eagles before the playoffs. So with the Chiefs there, it kind of felt like that AFC Championship was somewhat the Super Bowl. But I do think the Eagles, in terms of the matchup, it's going to be a really good game. Like, I can't see how this game is decided by less than a touchdown. And I do think that the Eagles, running the football, their defense, it's just an animal the Chiefs haven't seen all year. So I'm super, super excited from that standpoint. At the end of the day, I think the Chiefs are small favorites. That is definitely deserved. I think that they probably will win the game just based on, I don't know if I can really truly trust Jalen Hurts in some drop back situations, especially against Patrick Mahomes and especially against Steve Spagnuolo in terms of his ability to get pressure with blitzes. And Jalen Hurts has always struggled with that. And I know that Hurts played maybe the best game of his career last Super Bowl when they played, but he kind of felt like he was playing better football back then. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles won because, like you said, they're the most talented team in this game and in the league. But it's hard to bet against the Chiefs at this point, especially going for a three-peat. It's history. It's going to have to take a great effort from the Eagles to win.
Mitch, leading up to the big game, what kind of content are you working on for the Bottom Line View?
Yeah, I've got a lot going on in terms of I'm going to have a lot of Bleacher Report streams. Those go up on the Bottom Line View. I've got 4 this week, 1 later today. So it's dependent on what they're going to give me. Some of them will be off-season oriented. Some of them will be Super Bowl related. Today, I'm actually talking about, okay, what can teams do in the future to beat the Chiefs? So that will be an interesting video. So Buffalo fans will be interested in that. Bengals fans, they'll be in there as well. So that sort of stuff. And then also just breaking down the game, picking the game, betting the game, doing all that sort of stuff, the matchups, the X factors, everything, between the lines. I'm going to try to get myself going for this rematch because I felt like I really didn't want to see it before Sunday. And now I'm trying to turn around. I'm trying to turn this around, man. I'm trying to be excited, Jacob.
Well, a lot of fans are with you. I mean, a lot of people just aren't excited for this matchup. I don't get it because the last time these two teams,
it's a great matchup.
It's a great
It's just that like the two teams from a neutral standpoint are hard to cheer for. That's the problem.
Correct.
Because teams when teams have a villain, right? The Chiefs, the Patriots, whatever. They want a team that they can cheer for on the other side. And the Eagles aren't exactly Rocky Balboa. I mean, they don't exactly give off this underdog thing. They have a lot of unlikable features to their team. But that being said, it's a great football matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it's villain versus villain. It's Dodgers versus Yankees. We just saw this in the World Series. But one person who is not a villain is you, Mitch. We have you. We say it year in, year out. You're such a big part of the show in football season, and Brandon and I both truly appreciate everything you do for the show and having you on, every few weeks to talk about what's happening in the world of football. You're a big part of the show, and it's a pleasure being able to speak with you as always.
Thanks, man. Always enjoy the time. I'll see you later.
That is Mitch Milani from The Bottom Line View.